Hello, I'm Stan Stalnaker with Hub Culture and Event Currency. We're here at the Global Goals House in beautiful Canada. I've got a great panel here with me to discuss risk in reputation. Essentially, what we're talking about is ESG, which means environmental, social, and governance goals, vectored against millennials, because we all know that millennials are moving heavily into the global economy from a leadership perspective. And that leadership today means taking a stance on these subjects, environmental, social, and governance inside the corporate sphere. Joining me now is Gillian Tett from the Financial Times. She's the editorial director at large and the founder of a new project called Moral Money, which I'm so excited to hear about. We also have Beth Brady, who is the chairman of the board for the We Are All Human Foundation. This is a group, a nonprofit group that is working on the Sustainable Development Goals. But Beth also has a 30-year corporate history working for major companies in America on the communications marketing side, Unilever, General Mills, and most recently at Principal. And then Rachel Tipograph, who is the founder and CEO of MickMak. MickMak is an e-commerce company that is totally millennial. And from a millennial culture in the office, even to Gen Z, they're actually reinventing the way that e-commerce is happening on the internet. So welcome.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so let's dive in here. So Beth, why don't we start with you? Because I see this as a kind of triangle. We have the corporate view, like, okay, we got to change, we got to get good, right? And then we have Gillian on the journalistic side, holding people to account, and then Rachel on the consumer side, who's really like, you guys are the shoppers. So Beth.
Okay, well, I can tell you for 30 years, of course, plus, I've worked in corporate America and yes, some of those large companies. And CSR, or corporate social responsibility, was always a nice to have. And it was one of those things where you would do a nice campaign. It was usually separate and apart from everything else you were doing. But that's all changed. And that change is very scary. And Gillian will probably talk a little bit about this. But part of the reason it's changed is because of this very topic of millennials driving a need for companies to prove that they're not just delivering great products and services, but they're also giving back to the world. And it's that business mission and social mission coming together so that consumers feel like they can line up behind this company.
Now, is this an American trend, or, you know, many of these companies are global, but is this happening worldwide?
Oh,
or is it being led in certain markets?
No, I mean, it's absolutely, in fact, I would say the US is maybe behind some other countries, some other places in the world. So this is, it feels new, but it's been building for a while. It's kind of hit the US, and ESG and the various organizations that are evaluating companies are really holding those companies accountable. That in itself is a whole messy world that companies are just like, I don't know where to begin. I want to do good. Boy, I have this company I've built over 100 years that has a certain way of doing business, and that's like, it's like, you know, turning the Titanic, right?
Well, so we talked a little bit earlier about this idea of standards coming in. So, you know, even 5 years ago, there weren't really ESG standards that could be applied widely across companies. Has that changed?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that a lot of the measurement is good. I would say that's part of the problem, is you have all these organizations measuring companies, and they have different lenses, and so you may get a good score from one organization and not such a good score from another because they may look at it differently. One may put more emphasis on environmental, another one might put more emphasis on social, another one might put more emphasis on governance. And so depending on, you know, where you are, and then they, like everything else, some of the collection of information isn't accurate. So it's a tricky area. It's
really interesting because that actually segues right to Gillian around processing information. So one of the things that I think you're doing with Moral Money and even just the wider reporting at BFT is kind of linking it all together, right? I mean, you have these vertical silos where it's like, I'm good on supply chain, or I'm good on, like, say, my carbon footprint, or I'm good on, you know, social policy with my workers, or, you know, equal pay. But you guys are looking at how to link all this together, right?
Absolutely. I mean, to pick up on what Beth was saying, one of the reasons we're launching Moral Money is because there really is a big shift going on right now in both the business and the financial world and the policymaking community. I mean, the bad news, as Beth says, is there's still a lot of opacity, a lot of fragmentation, a lot of confusion. I mean, measurements of the ESG market right now vary from $3 trillion, according to JP Morgan, to $31 trillion, according to another industry group. That's a $28 trillion difference.
That's a massive gap.
Exactly.
What's $28
trillion to be friends? That's crazy. Okay. But here's the key point. Transparency is actually improving. And that's not only helping shareholders hold companies to account, it's also helping wider society to look inside companies and compare them. And it's helping the media actually have some consistent benchmark to use when looking at companies. And what's changing really is that pattern communication has shifted from being on a vertical axis, whereby journalists used to come down from the mountain like Moses with the tablets and just kind of chuck them into our audience, and without knowing what was going to happen or expecting much feedback, to these days we're in constant dialogue with our readers and constantly hearing about what they care about and constantly getting ideas. The audience is holding us to account as well. And a combination of that, coupled with transparency, that horizontal communication pattern that greater transparency means that increasingly CEOs and financiers are feeling that they have to embrace some element of ESG, even if they don't personally believe in it, because otherwise they're going to suffer damage. And revolutions happen when people begin to feel that it's more risky to stay on the sidelines and do nothing than to get involved.
So it's like a tipping point? Are we at that tipping point?
I absolutely think we're at a tipping point. And I've said that very clearly in the Financial Times, that we are at a tipping point, because right now, CEOs and financiers are making the calculations, Beth knows, it's more risky in the millennial world to not get involved, to ignore ESG, than to embrace at least a bit of it, whether or not they personally believe in these ideas.
So this goes right back to our risk versus reputation. I want to ask you real quick before we go on to Rachel for a second about this feedback from the readers of the FT. Like, how are you guys incorporating that? I mean, it must be a reason why Moral Money is about to happen, right? Because is that the vector where you guys see the most kind of interest?
Well, it's certainly a vector where we see a lot of interest. And I've had to shift my own mindset, because when I started my journalistic career a quarter of a century ago, which makes me prehistoric by most millennial standards, you know, I basically would chuck my articles out into the ether. We went to a sort of daily schedule where we had deadlines scrambled in the afternoon, and then we went home and we kind of hoped that someone liked them. We didn't know. Now I'm getting feedback within about 3 seconds of posting this stuff. And that's both bruising for the ego, it's challenging. It's also, though, a great way to try and engage with people and listen to what people care about. And absolutely one reason why I'm launching Moral Money is because I realized starting about a year ago that this was a topic that people cared about for reasons that are both good and bad. And we're not out there to advocate, we're there to illuminate. And so that's what we're trying to do.
So that's going to vector back to the corporates. But for Rachel, tell us a little bit about the millennial view on this. Like, you've got the audience, you've got the numbers, because the millennial market now is the market. How are you reaching these people? And tell us a little bit about the work culture inside MickMak.
Yeah. So before starting MickMak, I ran global digital at Gap, so I can sort of speak to both sides of the coin. So when I first approached this topic, everything was through the lens of corporate responsibility to drive customer acquisition. So at Gap, we had permission to participate in that space because the Fisher family, they're philanthropists, right? It was one of the first companies to ever give health benefits to same-sex couples. We had an organization called PACE that provided a K-12 education to our factory workers, most of them women in Southeast Asia. And so that was a message that we wanted to communicate to customers, because we knew customers wanted to buy into purpose-driven brands. That it was real, it was authentic, it was the foundation of the company. Prior to Gap, I worked on the agency side, where social impact was through the lens of marketing, and it flopped. Like, I worked on so many campaigns that were flops because it wasn't a part of the company's mission. Fast forward, I quit my job, I built MickMak, where my employees' age range from 22 to 45. And what I found is that it's truly a retention strategy. So,
So it goes inside the company as much as outside.
oh, yeah, I mean, it matters to me more than ever before because talent is everything. And so from the retention side, you know, what I've recognized over the last 4 years of building MickMak is the most important thing to employees is autonomy over their own time. And because of that, they want to be investing their time with people and companies that reflect their own personal values. So what's happened at MickMak is really it groundswell from the ground up. So we're a Slack culture, so fully transparent.
We're a Slack culture.
Okay, great.
I mean, talk about real time, right?
So MickMak, right? So we have something called MickMak 6-pack, which is everyone works out together. And if 3 people from the company work out together, I'll pay for it. And then someone created a new Slack channel a year ago called MickMak Gives Back. And every like 2 to 4 weeks, someone in the company is organizing an event where collectively they're going and they're volunteering their time. So yesterday, while I was here in France, my company was at the Bowery Mission. And from 7 to 10 a.m., they were all volunteering and then they went into the office. And that is driving employee retention to the point where a month ago, Inc. magazine named us one of the best places to work. And they do these anonymous employee surveys, so the founders can't participate. And this was one of the things that bubbled up from the employees is why they choose to work at MickMak. Is because MickMak is a company that allows them to invest time in the ways that reflect their own values.
So if I'm in a company, Beth, how do you take that and bring it into a huge company where you have to scale ideas, but it's really difficult to change the corporate culture?
Yeah, well, Rachel and I were just talking about that, and it's hard. I mean, the fact is that a huge company, and you can say whether it's from a 15,000 employee person or 100,000 employees, you know, it's got a culture that's been built up over a lot of years. And people individually are good. I mean, really, I do believe that, but they act good on behalf of themselves. Acting good and doing the right things on behalf of a company is really not what they've been trained to do. They've been trained to do a job. It's very been task oriented. And that's how companies have been built, is like, here's your task and do it really well. And that's how you'll get rewarded. And so having to shift gears and say, well, what we really want you to do is do your task, do your job, but think about the impact of it against all of these new values, and think about how the world at large is going to receive us if you do it this way versus this way. That's a really foreign concept to people. And so it can be done. I mean, we were talking about Unilever, which is a company I think has really worked hard at this.
Paul Pullman
Yeah.
Keith Lee did an amazing job moving Unilever towards the people. It saved the company.
And it did, but they've been at it for 20 years, and they would tell you they still have a long way to go. And their consumers would say, yes, we see a lot of good things, but there's some areas that we don't see. And so that's a company that's in it 20 years. So when you talk about companies that are just thinking now, oh wait, we have to address all of this.
But they can move too slowly. I mean, we're a tech company. We launched a digital currency 10 years ago. We then moved into digital identity 5 years ago, and we're now working on things that are so weird that it's not even worth talking about. But what I've discovered in tech, and I'm sure you see this, Rachel, is that everything moves so much faster now, and the pace is accelerating. So Gillian, how do you guys keep up with the pace in terms of figuring out where not only the market is looking for these types of issues? Like, for instance, Me Too and equality in the workplace has been a massive theme the last 2 years. Climate has been a massive theme. What are the next things that you see coming to the fore that companies need to be thinking about?
Well, in terms of our reading of the marketplace and the environment, we're constantly on alert, what's trending on social media, what people are talking about. And we have to steer a very careful line between not getting sucked into echo chambers. We can never just give our readers what they think they want to read about. It's a bit like giving a toddler cookies because that's what they grab for on the plate. You have to give them both cookies and a bit of spinach and kale as well, because they don't always necessarily choose the next new topic. So as journalists, we have to do both, or sometimes it's like a domino. We have to give our readers one half the domino that matches what they're interested in already, and then the other half will take them a bit further. But I'd like to go back to a point that Beth raised, which is to do with how companies see ESG issues, because I think the about tech. If you go back 20 years, companies viewed tech and IT as something in a special department.
Mhm.
And they were like tech experts who sat in a little silo. And people who were grown-up CEOs wouldn't expect to be expert in tech as well. They basically outsource that to somebody else. Now, something similar has happened with ESG. It used to sit in a department.
Mhm.
People who were in charge didn't feel they had any expectation of understanding it. And frankly, journalists themselves had a specialized tech reporter.
Mhm.
Today, that just doesn't work because tech is basically embedded in almost everything we do. And the question is, do you do more tech, less tech? But you can't simply ignore it in almost any job.
So everybody's a tech company, everybody's an ESG company?
Everyone needs to think of some element about how ESG issues impact them, because if they don't, they're actually running a risk.
I agree with that. I think from an, like, employee incentives have to align to this mission from the ground up and the top down. I was in a panel yesterday with 25 of the top CMOs, and the topic was diversity and inclusion. And the consensus was, we've got to move that out of HR. It needs to be a senior leadership responsibility, or nothing's going to change.
So it's gotta be in the C-suite.
Mhm.
So Beth,
And it's got to be in business schools as
Yeah.
well. It's very interesting. If you look at what business schools are doing right now, if you look at what, say, the CFA Institute is doing right now, they're all recognizing that you can't just outsource that to the kind of hippie add-on that was part of their overall training.
you know, I think it's also like social impact has moved from being the edge, like even looking at like a B Corp, to really becoming, I think, a lot of the language by which we navigate this in the corporate world. Like everybody right now is talking about impact and how that plays out.
Yeah.
Beth, do you find that that's the case in the boardroom?
Well, it's funny that you should say that, because I just this morning was reading an article about how boards are maybe part of the issue, and I don't know if that's true or not, but this article was suggesting that perhaps the boards aren't seeing the issue, because a lot of boards are made up of individuals that are not as connected to the current consumer base. They're operating on a set of principles based upon when they were running companies or when they were in the C-suite, which may have been 10, 20 years ago.
So should every big company have a millennial on their board?
I think it would, just like every big company should have diversity on its board. I think that's a diversity issue, and I think to the point of, we think diversity brings better thought, better understanding what we need to do. Sure, I think every board should have women, they should have minorities, they should have age diversity, and if they don't, if they're a board that is, made up of all men that are 50 plus, then I think you're gonna miss a lot of what's going on.
But there is nothing you can do other than simply looking at board composition, which is important, of course. But to think in the same way that it's entirely acceptable today to tell people over the age of 50, and I'm over the age of 50, that they need to basically go and brush up on their tech skills. It's like, go learn how to do a bit of coding and program. Why shouldn't companies wrap the two things together and say, listen, the world's moving on, go learn how to switch on your computer, get a grip on technology, and while you're at it, get a grip on how the climate's changing in relation to ESG. Companies could very easily put those two things together. And frankly, I suspect it would be more acceptable to try and not so much reprogram, but develop your over 50s workforce by talking about tech and then adding in ESG for companies than to just try and do ESG alone.
Yeah, and I'd like to make one more point. Like, one of the things that companies are struggling with, and both Gillian and Rachel can speak to this as well, I can certainly speak to it because I ran this area, is where do we start? And how do we, if we haven't been doing this for a long time, like, we all know it doesn't happen overnight, but where do you start? That's one of the reasons that we like the SDGs, is because they represent a framework where companies can at least look at it and say, okay, here are some of the big issues around the world that we can tap into, and we can figure out where we have an intersection. So, I'll go back to General Mills, a company I work for. I mean, they make food, and there's a hunger issue around the world. Well, they're a natural connection, and they have been for years, connecting with hunger. The challenge and the opportunity is to embed that in everything they do and make sure that they're talking that purpose about helping solve a world hunger problem, not just as a campaign, right? Like what Rachel was saying earlier, is companies and then they go off and do it, but make it part of their narrative in everything they do. And I think that's a huge opportunity for companies to start somewhere.
Yeah, and then I think what your point is now about this idea, what I would maybe call adaptive retention, is huge, right? Because, you know, in a tight labor market, which we're in right now, thank goodness, it actually becomes super important to hold on to those over 50 workers. And, you know, the cost of replacing a worker or finding that talent is, you know, companies are really realizing that instead of outsourcing or even replacing, what they have to do is actually train their existing workforce and get them fit for purpose for the future. So any final thoughts as we begin to wrap up
By the way,
here?
I love the word adaptive retention rather than reprogramming.
I'm
I'm gonna use that internally now all the time.
Hashtag adaptive retention.
Exactly. I mean, I call it upskilling, right? And it's for the entire company. I think there's just a lot of things that we don't know. Like, for example, the leadership level, at least in the US, there's a lot of tax benefits to doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so many of my fellow founders, and even myself in some ways, are not. Right? So there's just education that needs to happen across the to incentivize behaviors. I really think in corporations, it has to be about employee incentives for action to actually happen.
Yeah, you know, I think as a final word, it's like, let's take this back to the sustainable development. So things the SDGs have provided is finally a global framework, these 7 goals that try to figure out here at the SDG Media Live studio is data in regard to this, because if you have the data, you can do the the process is creating data hub that's going to be all over the world.
Cynical. I thought, oh my God, yeah, no, John, how ridiculous to have these targets and this framework. Well, you know what? Before I became a journalist, I'm actually trained as a cultural anthropologist. I have a PhD in cultural anthropology, encompassing framing matter. So, I now realize that brand cognitive framework